G'day. In this series of videos, we're using Psychopy and Python to do an auditory psychophysics experiment. We're starting from scratch. We're starting with no GUIs and no stimuli or anything, and we're basically going to build it step by step, so then you can get an understanding. So hopefully you can get an understanding of how to approach these sorts of experiments. This is just one way of doing it. There's many other ways that you can do it. So what we've done up until now in this playlist is we've thought about the problem. We've then created a very simple bare bones program that will loop a certain number of times, the number of trials that we want to do, and it's going to essentially wait for keyboard input because that's how you're going to get feedback from your subject. And the other thing that we did is we started to put in some timing, so some pauses and some elapsed time waits, so then we can control the progression throughout our trials. Now, we also are loosely basing this experiment on a paper that Mike, some of my colleagues, and my old PhD supervisor, Don, what they published back in 2008, because we just use a starting point. And so remember, we had a look down here where we've got the general procedure and the general overview of the experiments. Okay, so Mike did a cued, uncued task here where he presented a sound, and then a sound would either be presented in the first time window or the second time window here. And he did some other experiments as well, but you know, we're basically, again, we're loosely basing our experiment on this. So what we're up to now is, well, let's just have a look at what experiment we've got at the moment. So I've changed this experiment very slightly in that I've cleaned up some of the elapsed timers. I've just put in some core.waits, and that will pause for a certain duration. So here we've got a function where we're going to clear the output, and then what we've got is another experimental. This is our main program. We've called it experiment update. We've set some text variables here. We set up some timer durations. We create a window. We create a text stimulus. We clear the screen, essentially like the window that appears, and then we start our experiment by saying, hey, please press spacebar to continue. That's all this stuff here, and then we'll wait until the spacebar is pressed, and then we run into the main loop of our experiment where we essentially do nothing and we just wait, and we wait until the elapsed timers have elapsed, and then we present the number 1 or the number 2 according to the time windows when the sound may appear. And remember, this is what we've got here. Michael calls them the observation intervals, okay? Because the sound will be presented either in 1 or 2, not both and not neither, okay? A sound will appear. And so this is what we've got, and then at the end of that, what happens is we wait for a key press again, and if the subject presses F, then we're going to later on say that that was time window 1, and if they press J, then we're going to say, okay, that's time window 2. If they press Q, then we'll break out of the program and go back to real world. So that's the general thing that the general program that we have now, and it looks something like this. Now, if you haven't seen the previous videos, I recommend you go back and watch them because we build this program from scratch. So remember, press spacebar to begin. So I'm going to push spacebar. Nothing happens. 1, 2, okay, and then I push F. 1, 2, and then I push J. And you can see on the command prompt, we've got some output and some debug statements as well, which is what we've put in there. So this should run 5 times. So this is the last trial here, and then we break out of that program because we've finished the main loop counter. So you'll see there was some time periods there where we had a gap of time, and then the number 1 would flash, and then a gap, and then the number 2 would flash. We figured that out and how to code in those pauses in the previous video. What we're going to do today is put in the sound. So we'll play a sound when the numbers flash up on the screen that denote the time windows. Now, using Psychopy to play sound brings in its own challenges, because if we bring up the documentation, we see that, so this is psychopy.sound, we see that there are 3 different sound libraries that Psychopy can use. One of them is quite old, it's called Pygame. This is the one that we're going to use. Now, I know in the opening of this video playlist, I said we'll use PyAudio. I think I've changed my mind. I think we're going to use Pygame, this method. because we'll just keep it nice and simple at the moment, and this should work with limited fuss. So we could either use Pygame, the Py library, or the sound device library. We're going to use Pygame. And so this brings up the question, well, what's our laptop or your computer that you're using to program this, what's it currently using and what's it able to use? What's its preference? So let's check to see what our preferences are. So I've got another file here, excuse me, it's just called preftester.py, and I've saved it in the same folder. What we're going to do is say from psychopy, okay, import prefs, because we're going to actually get our preferences out here. I'll just drop this down. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to print prefs.general, and we'll run this. So Python pref underscore tester.py, and we can see here we've got all of these different preferences coming up. Win type, we're using Piglet, we're using normal units for this particular program. Allow GUI is true, and then here we go. We've got audio lib, and we're using sound device, Pyo, and Pygame, and the audio driver that it's currently looking at is primary sound, ASIO, and Auditory, and the audio device is default. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to force or impose our will onto the preferences by saying, I want to use the Pygame library. So what we're going to do is we're going to say prefs.general, right? And then audio, I've just got it written here just to remind me, audio, because it's a little bit annoying, audio lib. Okay, so we're going to go into that dictionary and we're going to pull out this item in the dictionary, and we're going to say we want this to equal Pygame. Right, so now if we print out prefs.general, and then we now print out the audio lib, okay, we should now see that it reads Pygame. And this is what we see here. So this is before we set it all, so that's this print statement up here. Let me just shift that to the right. Okay, so this is what we had up above. But now that we've set the audio lib preference, okay, to Pygame, you see it's now printing out Pygame. So this is one thing that we're going to have to do at the start of our program, and we have to do this. This is important. We have to set this preference before we import the sound library from psychopy. You have to do this first. So let's go back to our psychometric.py program. So we've got from psychopy import core event visual and logging. So what we're going to do is we're now going to import prefs. We don't need to import wave anymore, so we can remove that. And then we do exactly what we did before. So pref, okay, dot general, audio lib equals, and we're going to call this Pygame. Okay, the other thing that we're going to do is logging.console.setLevel, and what we're going to do, make sure that we only get the critical. Oh, I just hit the tab, critical. So we only get the critical errors. In fact, what we'll do is we'll set that up here. And now we, from psychopy, import sound. So we've set the preference and then we import the sound library. So now we should start to be able to play with sound. So how do we play with sound? Well, let's look at the documentation again. We're going to not use the sound device backend. We are going to use, not the Pyo backend, we are going to use the Pygame backend. So from psychopy, we've imported sound.backend.pygame. So let's bring all this in, Control C. We'll bring it into our program. What we're going to do is we're going to create the sound object, and then we're going to periodically just call it up to play it. So what we can do is right at the start of our experiment function, we will create CREATE sound object. Okay, and we're going to call this a probe tone. Okay, and then we'll paste that in, and it's gone everywhere. So let's go back here. There's a lot of stuff in this, but that's okay because we don't need it all. Whoops. So what we could do, right, is we could set it. We want it to play at C. So if you think of a piano keyboard, you've got from low A up to high E or C or something. There's 88 notes. So if you wanted to play middle C, you'd hit C, and it's the 4th octave up. So this would be middle C. Or if you wanted to play high C, or that's an orange drink, high C or G or something, you could just say, hey, please play G. The other thing that you could do is you can actually put in the frequency. So if you wanted to say, I want a 1 kilohertz tone, you would say 1000, and that is in hertz. So this value is in hertz. What we want to do, however, is we want to call up the sound file that we created using Audacity. So what we can do is we can create up here the sound file. So sound file equals, and what did we call it again? So let's call it, it was 1K, so 1K 250 milliseconds. So we're just getting the file name, 10 rise 4 times dot wave. Okay, we'll tuck that back into there so we can see everything. You can see everything. We'll bring this back in front. So the value now is the sound file. Seconds, well, we don't need to derive any seconds, or we don't need to tell it any seconds because it's going to take that from the sound file. Octaves, we don't need. Now the sample rate, remember we needed the sample rate, and for our sound output for Audacity, it was 48,000. It was a 16-bit sound. The name, that's if you want to log things. We don't want to log things here. We don't want it to loop, and we do want to present it stereo. Right. So here is the probe sound object. And what we can do now is whenever we want to play the sound, we can just go and type in probe.play. That's taken from this Pygame backend, so we can say probe.play, and then that will start playing the sound on an available channel. So let's give that a crack. So when do we want to play it? Well, at this stage, let's just play it for the first sound, for the first observation window only. Every time we run through this loop, we're going to play that 250 millisecond sound at the same time as the number 1 comes up on the screen. So here we go, we've got pre-observation time, that's good. Here we go, we set the text of the window to text 1, we then draw it to the window object, and then we flip the window onto the screen. What we want to do now, as soon as we do that, we don't want to do that. As soon as we do that, we've just gone down. Sorry, let's go back up. So we've just flipped it onto the screen. What we want to do now is we want to go probe.play. Okay. The other thing that we need to do is we need to now wait for the duration of the sound that we're going to play. So we're going to say core.wait. Okay, now to make this functional for any sound file, so we don't hard code anything, what we can do is we can say, I want you to wait for the duration of the sound that we send to the sound card, to the speakers. So we go probe, okay, remember that's the sound object, dot get duration. And so this should now wait for that time. What we're going to do is we're going to start a timer. We'll call this just pre-timer, that's fine. We'll start a timer before we play the sound, and then we'll get the time just after the sound has played and we've waited for that duration. So if this has worked, okay, so we'll go psychometric.py, we should hear a sound at the same time as the number 1 appears. So we've got this here. Pref is not defined. I think it's prefs, so it's capital. Pref, name.pref is not defined. Sorry, prefs.general. My bad. So here, I'm just going to rest this just gently next to, just here. Press space to begin. Okay, so I heard that. I'll hold it up. I'll hit the F button. J, F, J, F. Okay, good. So that worked. Hopefully you heard it and that YouTube hasn't encoded some sort of sound and vision things differently, but hopefully what you heard was a sound at the same time as the number 1 appeared. Now, let's have a look. How long did it take to play that? Remember, we're playing a 250 millisecond sound, so the duration of those timers that we've straddled the sound output should be about 250 milliseconds. Okay, so let's have a look here. So remember, we started a timer, we then played the sound, we waited for the duration of the sound, and then we got another timer, and then we're going to say debug time difference. So let's have a look here. Time difference, 0.24925, so that's pretty damn close to 250 milliseconds. And then we're 7.3 milliseconds over, so 250, actually it's 730 microseconds or something, isn't it? So that's 1 millisecond over, that's 420 microseconds over. So we're pretty damn close. So I think we can use this, we can get away with this. So what else do we have? Well, now that we've actually waited for that duration, okay, we can now, we set the text in.draw, and now we're in that inter window. So now we're in between the two stimuli. So we've just done this bit, and now we're in this bit here. So let's play a sound now at the second time interval as well. So we're in the interval, in the inter window here, we then set the text, draw, post observation. Okay, so where are we? Set text 2. So win0.flip, so it's going to put the number 2 on the screen. We are then going to say probe.play, core.wait. This will be probe.get duration. We don't need that anymore. And so this should hopefully work. What we should see is 2 sounds being played, 1 during each time window. Okay, so there we go. We have now just added sounds that correspond to the window, the observation windows. We've created one sound object right at the start, okay, using the Pygame backend. So sound.pygame.backend. Let me just confirm that they are coming through stereo. Because remember, the stimulus that we made was a mono signal. Oops. Yeah. It's stereo. It's very loud. Okay. So I can definitely hear that, so I would be at 100% there on my psychometric curve. Good. We've created the probe sound, and then what we do is you just say probe.play whenever we want to play the sound. We then have to wait for the duration of the sound. And we can get rid of this timer now because we know that we've got it working and that it's running at about 250 milliseconds, which is the duration of the stimulus that we have now. We've also put probe.get duration here because let's say in the future you want to make a 300 millisecond tone or a 614 millisecond probe tone. We have that functionality in there now because it's going to wait for the duration of the probe that we give it, the sound that we give it. Okay, and then pretty much what we have to do now is start to think about the actual design of the experiment. Because what we should do first is see if we can set the volume. Can we set the volume using the Pygame background? So let's have a look here. We'll go back to here. Parameters, play, get volume, set volume. Okay, returns the current volume of the sound. So that's the Pygame backend. So how do we do it? Set volume. So what we can do is we'll go back to our function, and every time that we play it, okay, we'll play the first one loud, so we'll set that to 1. So the volume here will be 1. Okay, so it'll go between 0 and 1. So let's have a look here. And then the second time we do it, we'll set it to say 0.1. So we'll do log base 10 difference, 0.1 to 1, yeah, 10 times. We can set that up here. We don't have to do it all at once. Probe.set volume, and we'll set that to 0.1. So hopefully the second one should be softer. Ah, what's happened? The first time it worked, didn't it? First one was loud, and then the second one was soft. But then the next time, both of them were soft again, and it continued to be soft. That's right, we didn't reset it. So every time we play that probe, we have to set the volume. So we'll set the volume, probe dot, actually we'll do it up here when we've got plenty of time to do it. We'll set it back to 1. So now the first one should be loud, the second one soft. First one loud, second one soft. Hopefully you heard that through the headphones. Okay, so now we can control the sound. And remember, the sound is going to be our stimulus intensity, which is going to be our x-axis on our psychometric function. Okay, we're not going to calibrate our sound output device. You'd probably have to use something like a piston phone or a B&K sound pressure level meter. What we're doing here is just getting a general idea of how to go about doing our auditory threshold estimation. Okay, we'll leave this video here. In the next video, we're going to start to look at, we'll probably do the experiment management and the data file that will come out. So then we can do our offline analysis or our online analysis later on. So we'll start to look at the pandas functionality, the pandas library, and doing experimental files and logging the data. Okay, so leave this video here. I'll see you in the next one.